America first and America alone are not the same thing. The US administration has the right to demand transparency from Ukraine in the use of aid, and from Europeans a more significant contribution. But leaving Ukraine alone with Russia would be a serious strategic mistake and a morally unacceptable decision.
It's time to say, Mr. President, you know what? Russia invaded Ukraine. Can we at least agree with this? Facts are important. This can literally put us in an international crisis. We can move towards the next world war. Because we have a president who wants to be friends with Putin and do everything to please him. Including lies about who attacked whom. Mr. Chairman, I have a minute left, but I really want to give in to any of my colleagues and ask if they will say today. Very simple when it came to the war in Ukraine. It was not Ukraine that invaded Russia, but quite the opposite. Is there anyone here who has the courage to say that Russia has invaded Ukraine? You can take my time. And this is another problem.
Hello, my name is Kateryna Soliar, and there will be no usual countdown of time. Because here, as if in a vacuum, only one time is frozen, 24 hours left. Although it seems that not only time froze, but everything around. Let's decide on the point at which we find ourselves, and how it differs from the point from which we started our walk. Nothing. This is the same starting point. Let's fix. After officially coming to power, Donald Trump said, "I want to end the war in 24 hours. What does he do for the first month at the presidential table? In addition to changing it, because Elon Musk's son, he wiped on it what he got in his little nose. He tried to put Ukraine in a position of strength. Yes, I'm from this planet. And no, I'm not out of my mind. He just did it in words. He said so.
Every time I say that Russia is innocent, fake news is always thrown at me. But I'm telling you, Biden said the wrong things. Zelensky said the wrong things. But Russia could have been so easily dissuaded from this. It was never meant to be a war. And all these dead people should not have died. And all these cities should not have been destroyed.
What does Trump say? Russia is not to blame. So Ukraine is to blame. If Ukraine is guilty, then it has attacked Russia. To attack Russia, you need to be either not full of reason, or stronger than Russia. And since there is nothing to confirm my first thesis, we automatically lean towards the second. So, a strong Ukraine attacked Russia. Therefore, Trump decided to weaken us a little and take away the assistance that was provided to us in monetary terms for the previous 3 years. True, he has not yet decided whether 500, 350 or 100 billion in aid has been provided to us, but he says he will take everything that belongs to them. During the first meeting of his cabinet, the American president confirmed that the terms of the Great Subsoil Agreement have already been agreed.
This will be a very big deal for rare earth metals and other resources. Everything is settled and we are happy. We will agree with Russia and Ukraine to stop the killings. The US will return money given to Ukraine.
Trump also confirmed Zelensky's visit to the United States on February 28 to sign a mining agreement and added that he had been talking with Putin for the past 2 years about the war in Ukraine. At this stage, Trump thinks that Ukraine is already in his pocket. We have fixed it. Now the next 30 days begin, which the US president plans to spend on Russia and actions towards it, just like with Ukraine. He simply lists the wish list as an already agreed fact.
Peacemaking. It's very simple. Reaching a conflict settlement agreement is very difficult. Let me negotiate peace first.
But it wasn't simple here either. Kremlin spokesman Peskov stated that territories included in Russia's constitution are integral to the Russian Federation. And this issue is non-negotiable. He adds that no one anticipates easy or quick decisions in US-Russia relations. The Kremlin thinks Trump is more open to listening than Biden. And that Russia and the United States have a wide field for cooperation, but there are no substantive conversations yet. It is also unknown whether they were on this day, but negotiations at 6.5 hours in Istanbul still took place. And when Peskov talks about cooperation, he means the Arctic. Yes, the same Arctic that the Kremlin has already sold to China. There are already negotiations between the parties on a study on the development of the natural resources of the Arctic, as well as possible new trade routes. Now they are at an early stage. The very idea arose during the negotiations between the Russian and American sides, as well as the conversations between Trump himself and Putin, which, according to the US president, are very successful. Arctic, it attracts many countries, because due to the state of glaciers and global warming, it can promise new economic opportunities, in particular, trade routes and natural resources. That is, while the United States plans to drive a wedge between the Kremlin and Beijing, the Kremlin seems to be doing the same in relation to China and the United States, to quarrel between the two great powers for good. And somewhere at this stage, you have to say that this is all very interesting, but where is the issue of ending the war in Ukraine? And that's the problem. Nowhere. Trump, like anyone else, does not have a specific plan to end the war. Yes, till now. On the 37th day of his official presidency.
There is no plan to end the war, but this does not mean that the war cannot end quickly, or continue for some time and, again, have an end. Because, look, if we talk so subjectively, the plan to end the war can only be built on one platform. On the one hand, on the coercion to peace of Russia, because it is an aggressor country, everything else does not matter. You cannot force Ukraine, because this will mean the ultimatum of fulfilling Russia's demands, and this will mean the continuation of the war in Europe, the escalation of the war on the European continent. You cannot force Europe, because Europe today is advocating, you see, with the initiative to create even a bank, to rearm Europe, in order to have more resources that will go to military and defense programs in Europe. And they want to join Great Britain to this bank, that is, to create a kind of European section of NATO. And these are all good discussions, but you cannot force the end of the war if you put pressure on Ukraine or Europe. Without very tough pressure on Russia, nothing will happen. And this is the plan. You just need to get to it. But look, taking into account one position, I want you and me to talk. Moral imperatives. Which you and I like, which are fair. That is, the murderer must be punished. They do not quite work in today's global political space. If we evaluate the policy of the United States, strategically assess. The United States wants to put pressure on Russia, get maximum profits, and then come to the end of the huge conflict in Europe.
Therefore, at his first press conference of the cabinet, Trump says, I will not give any big security guarantees. Europe will do this, because they are their neighbors. I mean ours. We will ensure that everything goes well. And, as you know, we will be partners with Ukraine on minerals. We really need minerals, they have great minerals. And this deal will bring us great wealth. We will refund the money spent. But then the current one, which turns out that although Putin is a smart guy, Trump says, but
Putin is a very smart guy, very cunning. It must be understood that he had no intention of ending this war. I think he wanted the whole thing. When I was elected, we talked. And I think we'll have a deal. I can't guarantee that. A deal is an agreement, a lot of crazy things happen during the deals. But I think there will be a deal. Without my election, he would have progressed in Ukraine, causing many deaths.
That is, we can forget the previous thesis. Here Trump is no longer saying that Ukraine attacked, that Ukraine provoked Russia, but claims that Putin needs all of Ukraine, or more.
I have great respect for Ukrainians as fighters. They are great fighters. But without our equipment, this war would have ended very quickly, and I gave them the javelins that knocked out those tanks at the beginning of the war. I did it and I want it to end. Will Putin make concessions? Yes, he will. He will have to.
Attention number 2. Trump remembers that he was the president who provided Ukraine with its first weapon. And it seems that now he is even a little proud of it.
Are you considering easing sanctions against Russia? Not now, no. Currently, there are sanctions. I want to see first if we will make a deal. But I think we can. I had very good conversations with Putin. And with Zelensky. Isn't this a dangerous signal to China if Russia retains territories seized by force? Oh, okay, go and try to get them back. We will do everything we can to get the best deal for both parties. But also for Ukraine, we will try very hard to make a very good deal so that they return as much as possible. We want to give back as much as possible.
Therefore, I once again emphasize the version that Europe or America, in the person of Donald Trump, killed Russians on the territory of Ukraine with their hands, albeit Ukrainians. And at the same time, Putin wants to sell Trump part of his lands and those for which they were killed in Ukraine. It's just that Putin really wants to make friends with Trump. He wants so much that he even began to threaten Europe with his special services. And he says that he will find more people who will nightmare them. Today he said that the first contacts of the Russian Federation with the new American administration inspire some hope. But the insidious West, as always, wants to deceive everyone, including Putin, and disrupt this process.
We understand that not everyone is satisfied with the resumption of Russian-American contacts. Some Western elites are still determined to maintain instability in the world, and these forces will try to disrupt or compromise the dialogue that has begun. We can see it. We need to take this into account and use all the opportunities of diplomacy and special services to thwart such attempts.
As they say, less than 3 years have passed since Russian propagandists, on Putin's instructions, first insulted Trump, and then began to kiss him on the hands.
Some kind of shame in general, as Schwanda said. The American president is suing a porn actress. It's hard to think of anything else. With a porn actress. Did he not satisfy her, or what was the problem? We will definitely come to an agreement with Trump. I assure you, all this will change. And we will be friends with America. All of them will not be at the negotiating table, but under the negotiating table. What we decide, they will do. Let's see.
The opportunists. In general, it doesn't matter who to kneel to. The key is not to get up and avoid thinking. Negotiations between Russia and the United States took place in Istanbul. Negotiations were private, and delegation details were undisclosed. It is known that the meeting should have focused on resuming the work of the embassy. Earlier, Putin lamented that only cleaners would work in these buildings if it went on like this. Maybe, even if they work for themselves, at least there is no harm from them. It is known that the meeting lasted 6 or 6.5 hours, and Putin's delegation left it to the clatter of their own hooves. That is, no comments. Instead, comments come from the hosted party. According to Bloomberg, Erdogan discussed with Zelensky and Lavrov the sending of the Turkish military to Ukraine after the peace agreement. Turkey is a member of NATO and has the second largest NATO army after the United States, which is a direct threat to the negotiations.
As a NATO member, Turkey is committed to regional stability and ensuring peace in Ukraine. Peacekeeping mission details are undisclosed. Further negotiations between the parties are expected to agree on the terms and mandate of the mission.
It seems to me that now Turkey will be declared an unfriendly country after such proposals. Because what does Putin really want?
First, it makes no sense for Russia to agree to foreign peacekeepers in Ukraine. Especially NATO peacekeepers. Why? Because potentially, we understand that Russia does not abandon the issue of control over Ukraine. And this control is no longer ideological or discursive, not cultural. That is, this is not a story about where there will be some party of regions again, but again we will have some pro-Russian politicians hanging there. No, this control is already physical. That is tanks, planes, some new occupation or attack. Sooner or later, it is thought of as possible and absolutely realistic. Under these conditions, the attack on foreign peacekeepers of Ukraine, NATO countries, can be regarded by NATO countries as a casus belli, as a pretext for entering the war. Not according to the 5th article, but just like that. Understand? Not according to the 5th article, but just like that. Because NATO can afford it physically. It still cannot afford it psychologically or ideologically. But again, we remember the year 1999 in Belgrade. NATO had no obligations to ethnic minorities in Yugoslavia. But nevertheless, there was casus belli. NATO understood, you can take advantage of the issue. And it took advantage of the fact that Serbia is still, as they say, clearing its throat. And Russia does not want to get into, I think, into a similar situation where it will find itself, let's say, in a state of risk of direct confrontation with NATO, especially within the framework of the agreement created with the United States. Russia wants to achieve a structure in which there will be no security ties between Ukraine and NATO countries. It's not about the United States itself, it's about it in general. No security ties between Ukraine and NATO countries. No training missions in Yavoriv, no Sea Breeze exercises, no retraining programs for Ukrainian specialists and other events. That NATO allowed to provide to the armed forces of Ukraine to improve management. All this will not happen from Russia's point of view. And this is to some extent a guarantee for Russia that Ukraine remains in such a blurred state for the long term, relatively speaking. But still the orbit of influence. Russia will not agree to this. And this is an important part of the plan, which was written even before Trump came to power. This is the plan that Kellogg wrote. This is the plan that Radcliffe wrote. This is partly the plan that Richard Grenolds voiced in his interviews. That is, to some extent, Russia wants to achieve a situation where it obtains, in principle, victory without hostilities throughout Ukraine. They don't just want the idea of ending the war as a war, but with Ukraine it will be what will happen. No, they want to directly influence the security status of Ukraine. Therefore, they do not consider any foreign peacekeepers as an option that they can sign up to at the moment, at least.
But about what Putin really wants, you can leave your thoughts under the video. I will voice mine in 24 hours.